Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs Dean's Leadership Series. I am Amani Jamal, and I am the Dean of the school, and I'm so happy to see you here today. At Princeton SPIA, we believe in fostering constructive dialogue that bring together a wide range of voices and viewpoints on difficult global issues. Our goal is to create a space for open and thoughtful exchanges, even when addressing the most challenging topics. This discussion is part of an ongoing commitment. Looking ahead, we have an exciting and diverse slate of speakers lined up for the spring semester as well. And I encourage you to take a look at the posters around the buildings for details about our upcoming events. Now, I would like to extend a special welcome to our guest, Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. Ms. Albanese's visit is just the latest in a robust series of discussions the school convened immediately following the events of October 7th, 2023. I am grateful she is with us today and to learn from her perspectives on the ongoing situation. Ms. Albanese is a widely published expert on the situation in Israel and Palestine and has been in her current role since May of 2022. In addition to her UN responsibilities, she is an affiliate scholar at the Institute for the Study of International Migration at Georgetown University and a senior advisor on migration and forced displacement at the think tank Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development. Ms. Albanese has also worked as a human rights expert for the United Nations, including at the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the UN Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Welcome to our school. Thank you. Thank you as well for being with us for what I know will be a thought-provoking discussion with our own Razia Iqbal, the John L. Weinberg Visiting Professor here at the school. Before joining us, Razia worked for the BBC News for more than 3 decades. The floor is yours, Razia. Ms. Albanese, please join Razia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dean Jamal. I'd like to extend my own personal welcome to Francesca Albanese. Welcome to Princeton. We've got a lot to get through. I want to start with the report, one of a series of reports that you have presented to the United Nations in your investigations of what's been happening in Gaza and the West Bank since October the 7th. This particular report is called Genocide as Colonial Erasure. So let's just go straight in, and I just want to read the summary. It's not very long, and it can form the basis of the questions that I'm going to ask you. In the present report, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, Francesca Albanese examines the unfolding horrors in the occupied Palestinian territory. While the wholesale destruction of Gaza continues unabated, other parts of the land have not been spared. The violence that Israel has unleashed against the Palestinians post the 7th of October is not happening in a vacuum, but is part of a long-term, intentional, systematic, state-organized forced displacement and replacement of the Palestinians. This trajectory risks causing irreparable prejudice to the very existence of the Palestinian people in Palestine. Member states must intervene now to prevent new atrocities that will further scar human history. So that is just the kind of opening, and this is the report, essentially. It's about 35, 40 pages long. And I wonder if we can start by addressing the title, Genocide as Colonial Erasure. Tell me first why you have chosen to entitle the report as that. We will get into the details of what evidence there is in the report that suggests that from your perspective there is genocide as colonial erasure. But just tell me why that as the title, first of all.
Absolutely. First of all, let me thank you for having me here, Princeton University. And I thank all of you for being here, including some that I clearly see from the symbols they display. You're welcome. And I hope you will also take the floor and have the opportunity to engage with me and to have a peaceful, civilized discussion. I know
There will be plenty of time for questions.
Yes, I know that the topic of Israel-Palestine, and this was the case also before October 7 last year, has always elicited strong passions and emotions. And it's not up to me to judge, but as a lawyer, I do think that there is no one single problem in the land for which there is not at least one solution if international law is applied seriously. But before I get into this and I answer your question, I wouldn't be me if I didn't do what I'm going to do. And because I noticed on my way to Princeton, and I congratulate you on that, but the university acknowledges that its premises were built on unceded ancestral land of the Lenni Lenape people, who were and are the original stewards of the land. As a visitor to this country and as someone who was born and raised on the continent from which colonialism and its most insidious manifestation, its most insidious form, settler colonialism, originated as a way to subjugate and degrade the natives. I recognize the profound injustices endured by Native Americans here and in other places around the world, like Palestine. These injustices remain largely unacknowledged and unaccounted for. An ongoing struggle of the indigenous peoples like the Native Americans here, it's really brutal, to regain and maintain their rights on their ancestral lands would be less challenging if institutions like universities and places where knowledge is created and disseminated were actually committed to addressing and unraveling the colonial past, beginning by confronting the prevailing colonial amnesia that affects many of them. And while no discipline is innocent when it comes to our colonial past, legal studies stand out for a general sense of denial. This is very much who I am as a lawyer, as a human being, and it leads me to explain why I title this report, which is the second. I can raise my voice if it's not audible enough.
It's just there are some people who are speaking in the audience, and
Yeah, that's
if I
okay.
can ask you politely to stay silent while we are talking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a choice. You're most welcome to stay. That's okay. It's okay. So, this year,
If you could
I've
leave
been
silently,
forced
thank you.
to become a very reluctantly, a chronicler of a genocide. We can consume ourselves with the semantics, but the reality is clear. Already during the first 5 months of observation of what Israel had done, how we did it in Gaza, and the words used, the strategies deployed, the policies enacted, the kind of weaponry chosen, how the people were targeted, I concluded through a study that I called Anatomy of a Genocide, and I presented to the Human Rights Council in March this year, that there were reasonable grounds to believe that acts of genocide had been committed. The reason, and I would like to go into what is genocide, because there's a lot of confusion.
Absolutely.
And also different interpretations of what constitutes genocide, but of course my prism is the legal one, although I'm not unaware of other meanings and approaches to genocide. But however, genocide is a very insidious crime to enact and also to prove evidence of, and it's made of various components. It's a trajectory. It's never a single act. And it seems to me, I mean, it dawned on me during the months that followed the presentation of my report, not only the futility of the legal discipline that I've seen serious legal scholars spending time in making justifications for the conduct that Israel has maintained over the past 12 months, but also failing to understand that the reason, or to remember that the reason why the Genocide Convention was written was to prevent genocide. It doesn't really matter right now where we are, whether a court has finished investigating to determine whether we need to act to stop Israel, because Israel is not stopping by itself, to prevent it from committing further acts that the International Court of Justice has recognized as plausibly constituting, putting at risk the rights of the Palestinians protected under the Genocide Convention. And so I took a step back from what was happening and looked at the trajectory in which Israel's conduct post October 7 has inscribed itself, what preceded it. And because there was an escalation of established patterns that culminated in acts of genocide. But it was important for me to look at the totality of conduct in the totality of the land against the totality of the people. This is the way we look at the genocidal intent through an holistic lens, as the jurisprudence says.
Can we focus a little on the definitions here, because you just use the word intent, and that is the hardest thing to prove. So there are various ways in which, in your report, you outline the conclusion that you draw that what needs to happen now is for the genocide to stop. But I just want to very quickly go through the 5 areas. The definition, this of course comes from the 1951 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such. And these are the 5: killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. I mean, there's a lot more detail, but you make reference very specifically to these 5 areas. And as we know from many genocide scholars, many of whom have come out publicly to say that they think Israel is committing genocide, many who don't agree, part of where the disagreement comes is over the intention and how you prove intent. And I want to ask you a very specific question about how you came up with the report, because access to the actual territories was denied to you. So explain to us how you came to put the analysis together, and then we'll look at the extent to which you think intent has been proven.
Yeah, look, had it happened in 1924, with the technological means that existed back then, probably I wouldn't have been able to investigate anything without putting my heels on the ground in Gaza. Of course, investigators will have to go, and forensic experts and legal experts, and enter and collect as much evidence that is still available. However, let's say that it's undeniable that there is evidence of acts that have been committed, like satellite imagery allows to see that 80% of Gaza has been affected, devastated, significantly damaged, or entirely destroyed. And what we are talking about is homes, neighborhoods, cities, mosques, universities, schools, 70% of UN offices, UNRWA premises, farming land, and fishing boats, and everything that is really necessary to survive. Why? This is utterly legal, and this is a war crime. I mean, this is a collection of war crimes, and we don't even need to really look at the intent. And so we have a collection of war crimes, and then look at how the people has been treated. On the beginning of October, I think it was around the 12th of October, Israel ordered 1.1 million people Palestinians in the north, while they were being heavily bombed, and while the south was also being heavily bombed, there were already people talking of carpet bombing in Gaza. However, 1.1 million people were ordered to leave northern Gaza and move to the south within 24 hours. Full stop. And immediately, I mean, like 5 minutes later, the order was publicized. There were, including Israeli lawyers, saying this is unlawful. You cannot do that because this is an evacuation order to be in line with international law. Needs to respond to certain criteria, like there should be a military necessity, there should be an evacuation plan, a humanitarian zone a safe zone where to allocate and the people in need, but also the dimension, 1.1 million people. What kind of military operation justifies the removal, the evacuation of 1.1 million people? Only if you want to use a nuclear bomb and you want to save these people. But look at in this area, there were also 22 hospitals, and also the doctors, the patients, the IDPs, everyone was ordered to go. And Israel said, if they don't go, they will be deemed terrorist or terrorist affiliate. And this is the thing. So, and then many of them were killed. I've documented, also relying on sources I can explain, but 42% of the victims of the first 3 months were killed in areas that had been declared as safe. So, forced displacement is a crime against humanity. It's when it's widespread and systemic attack against the civilian population. So we can look at this as disjointed acts. But let me go back to intent, because I don't think that there is difficulty in seeing intent. There is a difficulty in understanding what intent is. And I'm asking, do we really understand what is intent? Do we? Because we confuse motives with intent. Motives are the reason why someone does something, but intent is the mindset, is the determination to destroy. And destruction is intended as physical and biological. So it's a very restrictive interpretation of destruction. Spiritual elements, no, there's nothing like that. But the physical destruction of the individuals and the group is that. And it doesn't matter if Israeli leaders might have wanted also to liberate the hostages or to eradicate Hamas, whatever it means. And mind you that this is beyond a military objective. This is a political objective and should have been questioned from the beginning. But these motives do not affect the intent, may be part of it. In my view, they might even corroborate the intent.
So I just want to hone in on a couple of things that you've said. You mentioned crimes against humanity and you mentioned war crimes. So those can exist without genocide having taken place, and they are different. Genocide is the kind of crime of crimes, right? It's the biggest crime that anyone can engage in. And to prove intent by an individual of genocide is hard enough, but to prove that a state has the intent to commit genocide is even harder. So if you could explain to us how you have come to that conclusion in your report, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why I say this is the intent to destroy didn't form overnight. This is something that builds on decades of intended erasure.
So we're not talking about immediately post October the 7th. You're saying that this is a much longer standing intention.
No, but this is something that also, if you read genocide scholars like William Shabas, he says, and it's not just about the words that are uttered by leaders and the genocidal intent, the genocidal incitement per se, for example, it's a crime, but it's not necessarily acts of genocide. You need to have the capacity, you need to look at the reality on the ground. But the thing is that the intent that I looked at and I analyzed in this report, I decided to write this report in order to address the criticism and also the mental gymnastic and pontification around, oh, this is not a genocide. And I will explain. It's complex, but not impossible to explain in in a simple, accessible fashion. So over years of unlawful occupation, practicing apartheid against the Palestinian people, where Palestinians have been felt like an encumbrance, something to tolerate, and they've been projected as a security threat, something that represented an existential threat to the Israelis. Why so? Because Israel was conceived, and it doesn't mean that this is the only way Israel has to survive as a state. We need to understand no one here is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Personally, I have nothing against the state of Israel. I just ask and expect that Israel behaves in line with international law as any other member states, and be a virtuous member of the international community and doesn't practice apartheid. The problem is this, that Israel was created as a Jewish state, and therefore it can only survive with this demographic majority, the Palestinians with their stubbornness. Doesn't matter how you humiliate, how you deprive them, how you mass arrest them, mass incarcerate them, including their kids. You demolish their homes, they sleep under the rubble in the caves, because for an indigenous people, the land is not where they live. The land is who they are. And so the trees, and so the stones. And if I, from the West, understood it, do you understand why Palestine is becoming a global crisis? Because this resonates across the global South. They see in real life what Western countries have done to their ancestors. Unacceptable. And no, let me finish. I know you want short answers, and I told you I'm not the person. But again, I mean, you're also asking me to
Just to say, in my defense, I did ask.
But again, it's complex. It's not a black and white thing.
Yeah.
And again, the destruction of the Palestinians has been progressive, has been incremental, because the fragmentation of the land, the segregation of the people, the building barriers, the deprivation of possibilities to live as an individual and collective, the possibility of building homes, taking residence, studying, moving, when and where they wanted, is something that has been taken away from the Palestinians a long time ago, living for 57 years under military rule, without civil rights. Who liked to live like that? No one, and this was the hope. Sooner or later they will leave, and they have not left. Of course, the Palestinians have opposed this system, have resisted to this system, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. This is inherent to oppression. Oppression is violent and generates violence. But the point is that after October 7, which is a tragic date, it's a tragic date for the Israelis and frankly for all of us, for the Palestinians as well, because they had to be, their resistance as a people had to be associated with the slaughtering of civilians, and this is not what they are, what they want to be thought as. But again, the intent to destroy kicked in dramatically after that, because there was a revenge to extract from these people who were all of a sudden an entire nation responsible. Amalek. Think of this. This is the word that summarizes this genocide. The Amalek is the destructible, the destroyable, individual or animal.
This is the reference made by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, referring to the Bible.
The soldiers, if you look at the hundreds, I've only looked at a part of those, but there are hundreds, if not thousands of videos released by Israeli soldiers. And many of them invoke Amalek. They say, we are here to destroy, to occupy, to displace and destroy. This is the theme that has accompanied this.
I want to go back to the report, because the report is informed by two pretty important legal developments post October the 7th, and they do inform pretty much everything that you find in the report. The first one is the ICJ, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion of July 2024, which basically said that the prolonged presence of Israel I'm going to read this out. And in the whole of the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 is unlawful. So that was in July 2024. And again, the January 2024 ICJ case brought by South Africa against Israel, which ordered provisional measures to prevent or to stop acts of genocide. Incidentally, yesterday, I think, and you must be aware of this, October the 28th was a deadline for South Africa to submit more details in that case. And they have submitted, I think, a 500-page document which aims to establish that Israel's military actions in Gaza do indeed amount to a genocide. So why was it important to you to couch what you analyzed and what you investigated through the lens of those two legal developments?
Because they frame the context. So the occupation is unlawful, which means that the only recourse Israel had to ensure its security included withdrawal of the troops, dismantlement of the settlements, and stopping expropriating or exploiting natural resources, water, stones, quarries, and fossils, fuel, and whatever. And Israel has not done so. And even there are some member states reluctant to come to terms with it. But again, this is the framing. The occupation is unlawful, and already 20 years ago, the court, the International Court of Justice, building on existing jurisprudence, recognized the threats that emanate from the occupied territory for Israel. You remember, it was at the time Israel was building the wall inside the occupied Palestinian territory, and the justification for the wall was, well, there are terrorist attacks emanating from this territory, and we need a wall to prevent these people from entering unchecked. And the court recognized the risk, but said, you cannot build this measure in the occupied territory, because it would undermine the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. And the only way to end this, which the court didn't say in 2004, it said it this year, that the only way to ensure your protection is not by invoking self-defense, because self-defense is not what the word suggests. It's not the right to protect oneself, its own state, its own territory, or its own citizens. The right of self-defense is the legitimation to wage a war, to use force under international law, which is only possible in two cases under international law: when there is an authorization by the Security Council, or when a state is attacked by another state. And here the issue is not that Israel was not attacked by another state, the state of Palestine. I don't think the point is this one. The point is Israel cannot wage a war against the people it maintains under occupation, because the right to self-defense is to the state what the right to resist is to the people.
Who are occupied?
The people, right? Especially when they are occupied for 57 years. How do we reconcile the right to resist? Which, I mean, I understand that it makes states uncomfortable, but this is the ultimate resort that people have to protect themselves again, when they do not have the right of self-determination protected.
Can I turn to the West Bank, because you don't just deal with Gaza in this report, you also look at what's been happening in the West Bank since October the 7th. Can you, not just the West Bank, but East Jerusalem too, can you just give us some examples of what you found has happened? I mean, we know that I think close to 700 people have died in the West Bank since October the 7th. There has been a systematic and at times state-sanctioned appropriation of land belonging to Palestinians since October the 7th. And in fact, I think the fact that it has gone, or the territory has been given over to the civilian authorities as opposed to the military authorities, has also allowed that to happen with much more gusto. So just give us some examples of what you have seen has taken place in the West Bank.
Yeah. I'm sure that probably more people than 700 died. 700 were killed 700 were killed by the Israeli army, and a number of them by settlers.
I was just going to say, not just the army, settlers
And
too.
the armed set, oh yeah, and 169 of them up to, I mean, probably it's more than that because they are killed every day. 169 of them are children, and many of them were found having been hit in the torso and the head, which is something that has happened significantly in Gaza as well. Many of you, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the reports by American doctors who have been operating in Gaza. 65 of them signed a letter denouncing the many children, including very young children, toddlers, who had been taken to the emergency room with bullets in their head and chest. And I knew that, I mean, this was already happening in February when I went to Jordan and I met with some doctors who had just come back from Gaza. One of them put on my hand something, a piece of shrapnel that he had extracted from a mother's chest, and it still had, when it was extracted, the hair of the child on it, because she was sleeping with the child in her hands. And he told me that the lady was sleeping in a tent. So the soldier was passing by, probably, I don't know, walking, no one knows, with a car, but he was a shot from close range, because I asked, I said, are you a war expert? And he was outraged at me. He said, how do you dare asking me such a question? Doesn't matter, you don't need to be a war expert in order to, a war surgeon, in order to know what can be caused by a close range shot. End of the story. So this has been ongoing for a while. So this is why, when you ask me, how do you know without going there? This is just a bird's eye picture of what has happened in Gaza, the horror of which we will only know when the dust settles, the Israeli troops withdraws, and the investigators go in and meet the people, hoping that they will not be traumatized enough to be able to tell the stories, to be the storytellers of this genocide, and the shame on us will be endless, and I hope so, because it's everyone's responsibility. In 2024, no one can say I didn't know. However, the West Bank, in the West Bank, since October, I sensed there was a hardening of the procedures, of the military procedures against the Palestinians. And the first immediate sign for me was the Ben-Gvir's order to tighten the grip on the detainees, political prisoners. And in the first months after October, like 10,000 Palestinians were arrested. Now, the numbers have fluctuated, but as we speak, over 9,000 Palestinians from the West Bank only are detained. Most of them arbitrarily. But again, it's an unlawful occupation. So even if it's unlawful, Israel as an occupying power can still arrest and detain, but there are limits. And the thing is here, everyone from the Israeli human rights organizations to Palestinians denounce the brutality of the detention system. I had already investigated this detention system and can tell you, it was already a criminal endeavor on its own before October 2023. But it has worsened, and the same abuses, including torture and rape, that were inflicted to Palestinians from Gaza were inflicted to Palestinians from the West Bank. And many of those detained were journalists, doctors, nurses, and students. So, I mean, there might have been militants, people who resisted through armed force. And then the other thing is that we don't know. I mean, I didn't know before looking at the reports by WHO in particular and other medical organizations, but in the West Bank, the attacks against civilian premises and civilian objects has been particularly severe on hospitals. Health premises have been affected numerically more than those in Gaza. Yes. Although those in Gaza, I mean, there have been like no, I can't remember the number, but however, it's been intense, the attack the attack on health centers, hospitals, small clinics, and ambulances. And also, as you were saying, there has been the largest acquisition of land, of course unlawful, in 30 years, because it started in February 2023 with the new government coalition formalizing the annexation of large swathes of the West Bank. I remember I wrote a letter to the Secretary General saying, hello, shall we say something? Because, one thing is to talk about de facto annexation. Annexation, imagine rape. I know it's wrong what I'm saying, but I need to shake your consciousness. Otherwise, what an aggressor does to the land, which is not its own, is what a perpetrator does to a body when it rapes it. And it cannot be legal ever. Annexation is so illegal that you cannot recognize it. So even the distinction between de facto and de jure, it's spurious to an extent. But okay, let's talk about de jure. The moment Israel put black on white in a governmental policy act, that was annexation. We should have stood up and screamed out of our lungs. Everything was tolerated because everything was permitted to Israel. The hubris of this country would have not gone so unchecked had a modicum of international law be enforced.
Can I ask you about that?
Yeah.
Because you make a point that many have made time and again since October the 7th. So you're not alone in this, but this idea of the rules-based order post-1945 that we are all supposed to take for granted, the international law that all states are supposed to adhere to. You talked about the hubris of Israel, but in many ways, what we are also talking about is the complicity of the United States in this, in which the support of the United States, of the State of Israel, makes it possible for international law to not be taken notice of in any shape or form. I mean, I wonder whether you think that we are at a point now where particularly countries in the global south look at how the United States makes Israel an exception in the context of rules and international law, and whether you think that is a paradigm shift that has taken place.
I think that there is a paradigm shift that is taking place, but I'm not sure it really comes from policymakers, including in the global south, to be very honest. And I don't want this to sound depressing, because but the thing is that I deeply believe that the international system has been abusive, much beyond what we comprehend. And again, it's just through deconstructing, I mean, really analyzing, unpacking our past and seeing how the colonial roots have sort of blossomed into the global south, global north dynamics. One understands where we are. And so, yes, I think that there is more people in the global south, including the rulers, see that as the French would say, le roi est nu. It's pretty obvious that what was intuited before, it's clear. There is an unbreakable, unshakable bond, and we see the extent and implications of the unshakable bonds between Israel and the United States. However, I'm not sure that all the global south is ready to take a strong stand. Otherwise, it would have already happened. And this is the thing that the people, both in the global south and in the global north, are realizing. There is an Israelization and Palestinization of the relations between state and individuals, and it's clear. I mean, I've seen this year scenes that reminded me, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being the usual dramatic Southern Italian, but when you see a caterpillar and the police and the army undoing an encampment, I mean, those of you who have been in Palestine think that it's Palestine, and no, you are at the center. I won't name the country. It's where, I mean, it's notorious for being stingy and stubborn, but sense of humor, zero. And And, but again, we have seen police cracking protests with an incredible ferocity, even arresting children for waving a flag. Since when waving a flag, particularly of the people who are being attacked? You don't even need to embrace the genocide analysis. It's been very violent. They're cracking down on freedom of expression, on freedom of association. And this is something that especially the younger among us understand. This is not something they want for themselves and for their future. And I blame those of my generation and older who are not more forthcoming in taking a stand with the younger ones who
I've got a couple more questions before we open it up to the floor. One question really about what happened yesterday in the Knesset. Israel passed a law barring UNRWA from Gaza. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about, given how, first of all, embedded in the structure of relief and humanitarian aid UNRWA is in Gaza, what you think that will mean on top of what the people in Gaza are facing?
I know that it makes sense to think of Gaza, but the assault on UNRWA goes much beyond, has a significance and beyond symbolism that goes much beyond Gaza. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, I wrote about the unprecedented assault against UNRWA. But again, it was 20 years of attacks, of smearing, of accusing the agency of harboring terrorism. Because the problem is that the problem is twofold. Israel is uncomfortable with the Palestinians because the Palestinians and their own identity remind Israel not only of the impossibility to realize a state for the Jews only, but also the original sin. The fact that Israel, look, no one here, certainly not me, I don't judge anyone who participated in the colonial project, because it was a colonial project. The plan to build a national home for the Jews in Palestine, a land that was inhabited. It's a fact.
Well, both David Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky in particular says that it was a colonial project.
Yeah, but because back then colonialism was accepted, it was kosher. And so no one would really feel uncomfortable with it. So they even said, let us colonize in order to lobby Western powers like England, the Great Britain and the US. They used to say, let us, particularly in Europe, let us colonize Palestine as the French have colonized Algeria and the Brits have colonized India. This is not the point. The point is true that the Jewish people have been persecuted for centuries in Europe. Anti-Semitism is a European thing because racism is a European thing. And the thing is that the historian Razia, who's probably the person I've quoted the most this year, together with Nadera Shahub-Kevorkian.
He came to Princeton, I think, a couple of weeks ago.
Good. I always follow his steps. But he said something very important, and I keep on saying, Razia, you need to write that because it's so critical. He says, the Europeans, many have wanted to believe that with the defeat of Nazi fascism, the idea of the pure race had been defeated. It was not, and instead germinated in other forms, resisted. And this is still the matrix of racism that characterizes a certain posture of people in the West. And I'm not saying that in the rest of the world there is no racism, don't get me wrong. Is that unlike other parts of the world or other people, we really make a big fuss about human rights. We like preaching human rights, and this has been a steady element of our civilizing mission across centuries, and that element is still part of our DNA after 500 years of colonization. It's not gone. And again, as Raz says again, the idea of the pure race had already made millions of victims, tens of millions of victims, if not more, across the global South. Because genocides had happened through and through in the global South. It's just that it didn't register with us back then. But we need to remember this. And again, going back to Israel, the fact that Israel was created at the expense of the Palestinian people. Now, no one can judge. I mean, had I been probably a Holocaust survivor, I would have done the same. I mean, kicked out. There were no possibilities to go anywhere else because even the US and the UK, staunch defenders of Israel and the Jewish people today, they pushed back both with Holocaust survivors. Why don't we remember that? This is why I say we need to remember the past. It's so telling. They were discriminated and dehumanized even after the Holocaust. And I've learned it through Holocaust scholars, genocide scholars. So it's there. And the thing is that, so no one can judge what was done in the last century, 8 years ago. However, we need to recognize 8 years later that it happened at a huge cost for the Palestinians. And it meant the dismemberment of a nation. And the fact that there were 750,000 people were kicked out of their homes to make space for other people. How can you correct an injustice by making another injustice? So not only it didn't stop there, it has continued, but it cannot even be acknowledged. And the West is part of it. So you asked me about the United States. The United States, with its political leadership and the media, like the rest of many Western countries, has amplified the Israeli narrative, aiming to erase the Palestinians as with their history. And this is, again, this doesn't constitute genocide from a legal point of view. But cultural genocide is what Raphael Lemkin, the scholar, the Jewish scholar who gave us the term genocide, had in mind. He studied settler colonialism, and this is the destruction of a people.
Okay, I want to ask you one final question before I open it up to the floor. There have been many criticisms made of you in particular as an individual, not least by countries. France, Germany, the United States have accused you of spreading anti-Semitism. There were students who were protesting outside. Some of them, I think, are in the hall now, and I'm sure have questions for you. But I wonder if you will just respond to those allegations, because some of them are to do with very specific things that you have said, and some, you could argue, are distortions of what you might have said. But this idea of being told that you are spreading anti-Semitism, what's your response to that?
It's not been said only about me. It's been said about anyone who was there criticizing Israel. Again, Israel has a track record as a serial violator of international law. I mean, it has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It has not even anything to do with the Israeli people.
So do you think that the definition of what it means to be anti-Semitic has shifted since October the 7th then? Is that why
it started before? It started before. And there are over 350 Jewish scholars who have signed the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism in response to the attempt to instrumentalize what is anti-Semitism. And let's be clear, anti-Semitism still exists, and it's revolting and it's disgusting as any other form of racism and discrimination or xenophobia. However, in recent years, anti-Semitism has been used as a weapon against any critical voice of Israeli practices and policies and treatment of Palestinian refugees. And instead of leading to debate, because before condemning, we need to discuss. And before discussing, we need to understand, we need to study the facts in their objectivity, then we might get to different conclusions. But here, there is no discussion, there is silencing. And this is what I hate the most of these condemning people and putting people on the dock without possibility of recourse, not to justice, to rationality. I'm really disappointed to see that this hooliganism has become a common disease among diplomats. They have turned diplomacy, which has something noble in it, into a horrible, horrible practice, which is justifying crimes. How can we do that? I do not want to belong to this system. And again, I'm really, it's painful to have to do what I'm doing. I'm not enjoying being the special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, even if it looks that I'm having fun. I do. I mean, I don't like bullies. And when I have to put people back to their place, I take some, So I don't something I don't enjoy, I have to say, but it's painful because it's what I'm talking about. The fact that people here wave the Israeli flag, we are free to do that. But I want to say, what does it mean? Because I'm telling you how. I mean, with all respect for all the Israelis that have been killed on October 7 and before October 7. Do we realize that the justification, this is being used as the justification for the killing of 42,000 people, including 17,000 children. 17,000 children is something that I find suffocating. I feel choking every time I say that 17,000 children. Now, to those who are waving the Israeli flag, how would it be if I told you 17,000 Israeli children have been killed? I mean, how does it register what has happened? Does it register what is happening? Okay, so, no, and I mean, again, I'm an anti-Semite, the Secretary General is an anti-Semite, the ICC prosecutor is an anti-Semite, everyone is anti-Semitic, the General Assembly is an anti-Semitic. Do you realize how this belittle anti-Semitism and what really is, and how Israel's conduct being so closely associated to any Jewish person become implicitly the vector of the Israeli policies? No, I mean, I've said, and for the record, and let me say that, I've said I'm not the one who asks any Jewish person to express an opinion about Israel and Palestine. More than that, I understand that Jewish people might have this fascination. I don't understand that my fellow Europeans having a fascination for Israel, but I do understand that, no, it's not fascination. Jewish people have a profound love for Israel, and I respect that. I do not respect governments who do not apply international law. So, for the records, I have nothing to say about the choices of individuals. I have a lot to say about the choices and the political choices and the strategies of Israel, which practices apartheid through and through, and today it's committing acts of genocide, and the states, particularly in the West, who are sheltering Israel from accountability. This is what I'm interested in. Okay.